Okay, so today we're going to jump into 5 of Shakespeare's sonnets. And what's wild is that when you put them together, they tell this incredibly intense and surprisingly modern story. It's a journey through praise and then doubt, some serious self-loathing, and finally this huge discovery about what love is all about. And it all kicks off with a question that honestly feels like it could have been written yesterday.
Yeah, this is the big conflict, right? The thing that gets the whole story rolling. And, it seriously feels like something you'd see in a text thread right now. But nope, this is the emotional crisis at the very heart of a 400-year-old love affair.
So where does this all start? Well, the crisis begins right here. It's that moment where everything seems great, pure admiration, and then suddenly it gets messy. It gets tangled up with some pretty harsh criticism. All right, so Sonnet 69 basically splits this person right down the middle. On one side, you've got the public image. The poet's like, look, everyone thinks you're gorgeous. Even people who don't like you admit you're a fair flower. But, and it's a big but, on the other side, there's a serious problem. People are starting to look past the surface. They're watching what you do, and they're sensing something off, an inner corruption. Shakespeare calls it the rank smell of weeds. Ouch.
Here's the final verdict, the diagnosis, if you will. The reason the inside doesn't match the outside, it's because, as Shakespeare puts it, they dost common grow. Now, you have to understand, back then, this was a brutal insult. It means you're losing your spark. You're becoming, well, common. You're lowering yourself with cheap behavior, maybe hanging with the wrong crowd. Imagine a totally unique, brilliant person just becoming ordinary. That's the burn.
But then, get this. In the very next poem, the poet does a total 180. He backpedals fast. In Sonnet 70, he's suddenly arguing, hey, wait a minute, maybe all this slander is actually a good thing. His argument? That awful people always attack the most beautiful things. Like how cankervice the sweetest buds doth love. It feels a little desperate, right? Not super convincing.
And yeah, that shaky defense, it completely falls apart. And this is where the story takes a really shocking turn. The poet stops criticizing his lover and turns all that criticism inward. He starts to confront his own deep, deep feelings of worthlessness.
Wow. Forget me. That's it. That's his command to his lover. And we're not just talking about, let's break up and move on. No, this is something else entirely. He is asking to be completely erased from memory.
So you're probably thinking this is just self-pity, right? But that's not how he frames it. He presents this as the ultimate act of selfless love. He's basically saying, I love you so much that I would rather you forget I ever existed if remembering me would ever cause you even a moment of sadness.
And just when you think it can't get any more intense, Sonnet 72 comes along and just doubles down. It's not even about forget me so you won't be sad anymore. Now the poet is insisting that he's not worthy of being loved at all, that there was never anything about him worth loving in the first place.
It gets even crazier. He tells his lover, look, if anyone ever asks you why you loved me, just make something up. Tell a virtuous lie, a nice little deception to protect yourself. Why? Because the truth, he says, is just too embarrassing. So, what is this terrible truth?
Well, here it is, the knockout punch. The poet turns on his own art, the very poems we're reading right now, and calls them shameful, worthless. He's telling his lover, you should be ashamed for ever loving something so worthless. I mean, this is it. This is rock bottom for our narrator.
But from that absolute low point, something incredible happens. We get Sonnet 73. And honestly, this poem is the emotional heart of the entire story. It's this stunningly beautiful, sad portrait of his own decay. And it's the moment where everything starts to change.
So how does he paint this picture? He gives us 3 incredible metaphors for aging and dying, and they get closer and more personal each time. First, he's like the end of the year, late autumn. Then, he's the end of the day, that fading twilight. And finally, he's the end of a fire, just the glowing embers left.
And inside that first autumn metaphor, you find this line. This is no joke, one of the most famous lines in all of English literature, and for a very good reason. It's just an image of complete and utter desolation.
Okay, so what makes this line so amazing? Well, in just 8 words, Shakespeare packs in 3 whole layers of meaning. First, there's the natural world. Bare branches where birds used to sing. Simple, right? Then there's history. In his day, England was filled with the ruins of old monasteries, their choirs literally silenced. And finally, there's the personal layer. It's the poet's own body getting older, his creative voice going quiet. It's absolutely brilliant. And that brings us to his last image, the dying fire. And here he hits us with this incredible paradox. Think about it. The very thing that fed the fire, the wood, the fuel, that's what becomes the ashes that choke it out in the end. So the very act of living is also the act of dying. Mind-blowing stuff.
Okay, so we've been through a lot here. The criticism, the self-hatred, all this talk about dying. Where on earth is this all going? Well, it leads to a truly surprising and I think really profound revelation about what love actually is.
Here it is, the big finish, the last two lines of Sonnet 73. The poet looks right at his lover and says, "You see all this. You see that I'm fading away, that I'm coming to an end. And seeing all this decay, it doesn't make you love me less. It makes your love stronger."
And that is the incredible psychological truth that resolves this whole crisis. Knowing that something is going to end doesn't kill love, it intensifies it. It gives it this fierce, protective feeling. We hang on tighter and we love more deeply, precisely because we know it won't last forever.
So that leaves us with a pretty big question to chew on, doesn't it? Is it the fact that things have to end? Relationships, our youth, life itself, is that what gives them their meaning? In a weird way, does love actually need that shadow of loss to really truly burn bright?